I hope this is obvious, but let me say it anyway. The church is more than a historical reenactment society, right? You know about those clubs or groups that people will get together and they'll dress up in period dress for, say, the Revolutionary War or the Civil War or some other moment, and they'll recreate what it was like in some other previous time. They might even fight a mock version of a battle. You'll find it in Renaissance fairs as well, where people will sort of dress the way of a previous time, or if they're really precise about it, exactly reenact the moves and the plays of a battle on a battlefield. The church is always more than just recreating or retelling stories of the past. Now, I know at first blush it might sound like, well, every Sunday it sure sounds like we spend a lot of time telling stories about things that happened in the past. And sometimes even in the church's life, we do have our own almost kind of reenactments. We have the parade on Palm Sunday, sort of with the palm branches reenacting Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. We wash feet on Maundy Thursday. There are some ways it does kind of feel like we're a reenactment society that retells old stories and nothing more. Jesus, however, has always been of the opinion, and his opinion is important, Jesus has always been convinced that the community of his followers isn't only rooted in the past, but is led forward because we aren't alone with just the memory of Jesus and what he did, but we are gifted with the Holy Spirit, whose presence with us as an advocate, as a counselor, as a comforter, as a presence who guides us along the way, leads us forward. That's really, really, really important, because it is tempting, let's be honest, always and only to focus on what used to happen, right? It's comfortable, it's nostalgic to retell the stories of the good old days or remember when this happened, and to only reenact or retell things that happened a long time ago. And to be sure, part of the church's witness is to retell the stories of our ancient ancestors in faith and the first followers of Jesus and the teachings and the way of Jesus. Absolutely. But the temptation for us is never to move forward from that. And Jesus, as we'll see this coming Sunday, doesn't talk to his disciples about just reenacting or retelling what he did or even what he told them, but how they move forward living out his way of life. This coming Sunday, we're going to pick up back in chapter 14 of John's Gospel. It's again that moment where Jesus is talking to his disciples in the last hours he has with them before heading to the garden where he's awaiting the lynch mob, an arrest, and then a trial, and then a cross. And Jesus is trying to prepare his disciples for what life will be like on the other side of all that. And it's interesting, he doesn't just say, take notes about what happens, guys, you're going to want to retell this. Instead, he says, I've been teaching you and directing you and offering you a way of life all along. Now I'm asking you to trust and to live out, to keep those commandments, to live the way I've taught you to live. But don't worry, I'm not leaving you alone. You're not going to be orphaned. I'm going to be sending to you the advocate. In fact, another advocate like me. So whatever Jesus has been for us, the Holy Spirit is going to be like for us as well. And the Spirit's job, this advocate's job, isn't just to help us make better and better recreations of the past, but to move forward in the present and into the future, living out the Jesus way of life. That's what we're gathered for, really. And to be sure, the stories and the teachings of Jesus from the past, the stories from the Bible and ancient Israel, those are important. They help guide us on the trajectory of where we headed today. But we can never stop short and just say, let's tell the stories about what happened a long time ago, as long as we don't have to think about how do we actually live it out. There's the challenge. How do we actually live it out? Now, if all we had was a bunch of stories and we're trying to just sort of extrapolate, well, Jesus did this, so we should do these 5 things, we're kind of on our own still. Jesus doesn't just say, you've got the data points of things I did, figure out what I want you to do in the future. He says, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm not going to leave you by yourselves or abandon you. The Spirit will be with you, continuing to guide you, enabling you to live the way I've commanded you, I've taught you to live, to be people who love not just neighbors who we like, but strangers we don't know and enemies that we feel opposed to be gracious to the people that we have a hard time getting along with, to lift up those who've been stepped on and cast out, to live the Jesus way of life, practicing generosity and being brave and courageous in telling the truth. That's a way of life that moves us forward from just reenacting Bible stories to taking that and practicing it in our daily lives. In the days when we wonder, how am I supposed to respond to this situation in my life or this thing going on in the world? We aren't alone. Jesus insists we're given the Holy Spirit. That makes a difference. That's the conversation we're having this coming Sunday as we take a look more deeply into John chapter 14. See you along the way.